For those who don't believe that political economic questions and their answers are entirely grounded in philosophy, or that philosophy underpins all knowledge, scientific and otherwise, I ask you to observe the nightmarish spectacle unreeling before us now. Because in your lifetime, you're not likely to see a greater global-wide testament to the inescapable fact and nature of philosophy's foundational place in human life. Ask yourself this: how do you know what you know or believe you know about COVID-19? How do you know how contagious it is? How do you know the risks, the infection rate, the demographics, the geography of the spread? How do you know the actual death rate? By what means do you calculate it if you don't know the infection rate? Ask yourself, by what method or methods do you conclude? By what process do you determine accuracy? How do you distinguish between possible, probable, and certain? How do you decide if the information you're acting upon is true? By what standard? And what does true mean? Is it synonymous with correct? Ask yourself, how do we calculate the number of people worldwide who are suffering from other illnesses and who cannot receive medical attention because of policies that have been put into place overnight? Upon what data were these policies determined? Is it accurate to say that poverty is by far the greatest cause of disease and death in the world, and that free exchange lifts humans out of poverty? How does government determine essential businesses from non-essential, and why? And are there dire ramifications in bringing a multi-trillion-dollar economy to a grinding halt overnight? Is the division of labor so interconnected that supply lines, including the food supply, will be seriously disrupted? By what authority is government permitted to arrest people for being outside walking alone? By what authority is government permitted to break up a 1-year-old's birthday party? How do we calculate the number of people who will lose their entire life savings and the retirement for which they worked all their adult life? How do we calculate the number of small businesses, including dentists, veterinarians, optometrists, doctors, and much, much, much more, that will vanish because of governmental mandates? Mandates permitted by whose authority? Mandates based upon what data? And how do we know if that data is correct? How do we calculate the number of grocery stores and gas stations that will no longer be able to stay open and keep stocked? Will crime spike? Will the social fabric tear apart? And how do you know one way or the other? How? How do we even attempt to know? Nobel Prize winning economist Friedrich Hayek described the, quote, flow of knowledge as the central issue in all social organization, close quote. Social organization is overwhelmingly economic. Ask yourself, have we been cut off from a flow of knowledge which otherwise would have been ours had we left this issue to the private non-governmental sectors? Which sectors would have brought you a COVID-19 test as quickly as you could order takeout and for the exact same reasons? Ask yourself, why have contrary perspectives by people with impeccable credentials been ignored? Why has South Korea have infection rates fallen and fallen with no shutdowns, no geographic quarantines, no panics, but everything open for business? Was it simply that they had access to testing, which is to say that people were given access to the essential and most important flow of information that was necessary at the time? Was this really the case? And is the opposite actually the major source of the problem in, for example, the United States? Is it really, as Hayek said, that the flows of information, when they're cut off by force for whatever reason and in whatever form, leads to complete chaos? I'm even prepared to argue that it is largely because philosophy has been explicitly written off as something for academic hair-splitting only, nothing surely which affects day-to-day human life, that the events of today have hit such a shocking and calamitous state. And I use the word explicitly because in actuality, philosophy cannot be written off. It's an inescapable necessity of human life, a prerequisite of life for a conceptual species, so that most people's philosophical notions come to be implicitly developed. The majority of humans across the globe holding convictions, whether political, economic, ethical, epistemic, aesthetic, metaphysical, or any cross combination, which they've never thoroughly examined, that have only implicitly absorbed.